Welcome. In today's episode of Connecting the Dots podcast, we dive into the world of maternal health with an internationally recognized leader on the front lines of both care and research. Complications like preeclampsia, fetal growth restriction, preterm birth, and stillbirth continue to claim the lives of mothers and babies alike. Globally, preeclampsia alone is responsible for nearly 500,000 infant deaths and over 70,000 maternal deaths per year. Our guest's groundbreaking work, including conducting Africa's first genetic study on preeclampsia, is helping change that. With research anchored in both Makerere University in Uganda and Cambridge University in the UK, she's working to develop better tools of predicting, managing, and ultimately preventing these dangerous complications rooted in the realities of African women's health. And if you don't know our guests, then listen up. Professor Annettee Nakimuli is an internationally renowned maternal health researcher committed to building maternal research capacity in Africa. She is the Dean of School of Medicine and Associate Professor of Obstetrics and Gynecology at Makerere University. Annette trained as a medical doctor and later as an OBGYN at Makerere University, as well as getting her PhD in medicine and her doctoral training at Makerere and at Cambridge universities. Her research group mainly investigates the great obstetrical syndromes, preeclampsia, fetal growth restriction, stillbirths, preterm births, and maternal infections in African women. Welcome, Professor Annette.
Yeah, thank you, Juliet. And it's really my pleasure to be on Connecting the Dots podcast.
Thank you, Prof. Prof, maybe tell us a little bit about your background, and also your fondest memories from your early days as a OBGYN at Mulago Hospital. And maybe you can paint a picture of your childhood and then your professional career and why you ended up becoming an OBGYN.
Well, thank you. So, briefly about myself, as I've been introduced, I'm Annettee Nakimuli. I'm an obstetrician and gynecologist. So, I'm a clinician scientist in that someone who practices obstetrics and gynecology, that is looking after pregnant women, but also does research to try and understand some of the problems they face with a view of improving their pregnancy outcomes and experience. And of course, when we talk about pregnant women, the baby is always an assumed major part of it, but also the wider community and the spouses. So in a way, we say as an obstetrician, I look after the entire community as I'm responsible for ensuring the next generation of humans on Earth. So I've been an OBS for 20 years, having graduated at Makerere exactly 20 years ago, and having also started out as a general practitioner. And even then, I had very strong interest in the care of pregnant women and newborns. So even as a GP, I really do cared a lot for women, which was about 2 years of my practice. And then also continued as an obstetrician and gynecologist at Mulago, which is the main teaching hospital for Makerere University. So my very early days, I mean, I became a gynecologist when I was a young woman, also becoming a mother myself. So I always found the practice intriguing, and I felt that I had a big contribution to make women survive their childbirth experience and also end up going home with a bouncing baby. And at that time, there were very few women of us in the discipline. We are not yet that many, but at least the number is much better than it was then. And it concerned me very much, even at that early stage, that women were increasingly dying in childbirth, and there was almost acceptance of that as a norm. And so it's one of those things that inspired me that no, 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 there's something we can do about this. Some of these causes of death are some things we need to understand better in order to develop better ways of diagnosing, treating, and even predicting who can get them. And that's how I came into the preeclampsia world. Because preeclampsia itself as a disease is remained one of the major killers of women and their newborns. but very little was being studied about it, especially in Africa.
And Annette, I'm a bit interested in what is it that made you focus on women's health as a career?
So, what made me focus on women's health at a very early age? I mean, as a general as a young person, a child, I always felt. First of all, I mean, when you're young, you get sick, you go to hospital, you get cared for, and as a child, you get better very quickly. So my space was really always around pediatricians, the doctors who look after children. But for some reason, I always felt like I was more interested in those very small babies who come. So at a very early age, I always used to wonder, how do babies come to be? How do we get to be, to get into this world? And I remember, I think some of the responses I used
Yeah.
to get from adults, they thought they were smart enough, but I think as a child, I started punching holes in them. Like I remember one time when I asked how the babies come about, my grandmother then showed me a picture of a cow giving birth to a calf coming from behind. I was like, so it comes from behind there. Then he said, yeah, but you see, when you grow older, you'll understand more. So that left me a bit curious. What do they
A
mean when I grow
little, a
older?
little.
Then I remember asking that, does it pain? They said, pains a little like when you want to go to the toilet. So that was really a 6-year-old, 7-year-old trying to understand how beyond just going to the hospital and seeing other children sick, how these newborns come to be. So I remember that my interest started. Then I asked, who are the doctors who look after pregnant women? What are they called? They said gynecologists. I'm like, okay, when I grow up, I want to be one. Everyone thought it was a joke because this was at about 7, 8 years. And of course, I continued to grow, and there was the culture that when you do very well, and it's something which I think is still around very much. If you're clever in school, people say, "Do you want to be a doctor?" So you kind of narrow down your choices early. That, oh, I want to be a doctor. But the question was always, which doctor do you want to be? And I would always say, I want to be a gynecologist because I want to help pregnant women get babies because I love newborn babies. So anyway, and along the way, I continued.
Yeah.
By the way, as a typical young person, sometimes I'll change my mind and say, maybe I want to be a lawyer. I don't want to be a gynecologist anymore.
Mhm.
But that was the more consistent choice of career. And fast forward, I then interacted more. I had relatives. One of them was my grandfather, who was a surgeon. And he used to tell me how it's nice to be a surgeon, but I really never warmed up to it so much. So one time he told me, by the way, you say you want to be a
Yeah.
gynecologist. Do you know that those are also surgeons? I'm like, oh, really? Then I want to really be a gynecologist. And there was that inspiration, but I think most of what really concretized this interest was seeing some of the few women gynecologists who were around who taught us gynecology as general medical students. I think I just really liked the way they did their things. They inspired us, talked to us about the need to come out and look after fellow women and not just shy
I
away
mean,
because the tendency was to mainly go and look after. Many women were going into pediatrics.
no, and it's impressive to see that it's been over 20 years that you stuck true, first of all, to a field that you were excited about when you were 6 or 7, and then you ended up becoming the internationally reclaimed researcher in the field of women's health and as an OBGYN. Um, you've done a lot of research and you've established a major group. What is one commonly held belief about pregnancy or childbirth in the African context that you would say your research has completely debunked?
I think over the years, even when I started out in this field, there was this
Yeah.
acceptance of death in pregnancy as normal, as to the point that when women died in childbirth, there was a lot of mystery around it to try and get words which are more acceptable, to almost kind of sanitize it. For example, in the central part of the country here, Uganda, where I come from, if you listened into the announcements, the death announcements, which was a typical thing, you would hear so many women dying, but they would say they died during the war. So someone could easily miss. And this growing up was the time of war. There was a big civil war going on in my country. So actually, as children, we thought they were dying in that war. But when you would ask adults around, then they would say, oh, that means they died while giving birth. But that is something that is so deeply rooted, and I know most of the cultures in Uganda, in Africa, actually, of course, appreciate that pregnancy and childbirth is a kind of war, and probably even the name labor kind of attests to that. But what is even more concerning, and which I'm happy that we've done something about, is the fact that dying in childbirth was being accepted as normal. And that's why even when women would die, society would easily accept that this happened, but well, there was not much, there's nothing much that could have been done about it. And then people move on. But the consequences would be really, they wouldn't end with that death. This will leave many children unattended to. It's the end of an entire family's life in terms of survival. Some children would die because they don't have a mother to really take good care of them. They would end up in other people's homes. So part of the work we do as my group for pregnancy complications, and not just preeclampsia, is to create that awareness that dying in childbirth is not normal, but also to highlight some of the major causes and try to show that there's much we can do about them, especially if mothers seek care and come to the healthcare providers in time, and then they are able to prevent, if possible, even if it's not possible to prevent, manage these complications and make the mothers and their babies survive. So that has been really one thing that cuts across all our work, in addition to the what we call elegant research going on. We do a lot of community engagement, but with the aim of really raising awareness not only to the women, but also all those that give them the social support, their spouses, their relatives, church leaders, cultural leaders.
And I love the way you've talked about the social support in the community surrounding the women. Sometimes you see a pregnant woman and you think she's the only one who's giving birth, but actually there's an entire community around her that's supposed to play a key role, significant role during the pregnancy, whether it is a husband and also post pregnancy. I know in the African culture, it's always good to be surrounded by your mothers, your in-laws, even your sisters to be able to support the caregiving. Annette, you are well known for your work and your research group around genetic study and preeclampsia. So perhaps you can unpack for us. And you have rightly said that preeclampsia is one of those conditions that cause us to lose a lot of our mothers during pregnancy and during childbirth. What is preeclampsia?
So, what is preeclampsia? Preeclampsia is a complication of pregnancy that is characterized by increase in blood pressure. All people have blood pressures which keep them alive and do a lot of important things, but when they rise, they become a problem. So we have this condition which occurs in pregnancy, where a woman who was having a normal blood pressure gets a sometimes sudden or gradual rise in blood pressure, which then leads to several complications, like getting seizures. They fit like epileptics. They can end up complications of their kidneys not working well. Their heart could be affected, any part of their body. But all in all, what we say is that this disease, usually the woman is feeling okay, healthy in the early stages of it. So the best way one can detect it is by measuring the blood pressure. So it's been a major cause because it's kind of a silent killer. Because if someone doesn't feel unwell, they don't think really there's a problem with them. So it requires a lot of engagement with the women to make them realize they need to keep in healthcare facilities and have their blood pressure measured. Now, preeclampsia does not only affect the pregnant women, it also can affect their unborn babies. They can die while inside the mother's womb, or they can grow at a less speed than they should, what we call fetal growth restriction. They can even be born when they are tired, what we call asphyxia. And also, one of the major impact of preeclampsia on the newborn is that many times, if the mother gets the disease, we have to deliver her so that she will reverse that disease. And this way, we have ended up having many of the babies born prematurely, not because preeclampsia causes premature delivery, but because we are attempting to save the mother's life. So it contributes a significant amount to the many premature births we see, not only in Africa but globally. But also, what that means, these new premature babies have a lot of complications. So they end up many times dying from these complications of prematurity. So that is really preeclampsia, but just to say it is a leading cause, it's number 2 leading cause of death in most of the settings. And for example, in Uganda here, it causes 16% of maternal death and being second to bleeding in childbirth.
Annette, what is the leading cause? You said preeclampsia is number 2.
Most women die from bleeding during pregnancy or childbirth.
Actually, and we should have said even during your bio that you are a Callistus Juma fellow, and we had the opportunity to interview one of your colleagues, Professor Moses Obimbo, who has been doing a lot of work on the end PPH, ending postpartum hemorrhage. Back on preeclampsia, what is the cause of preeclampsia? Is there any reason why in this part of the world it's a big problem and contributes to so many deaths from mothers and children or babies, infants?
So preeclampsia is
You're out of work.
what causes it. If we knew what causes it, I think I would be out of, of business. But that's the reason why I think we spend sleepless nights, because though we've got to understand a lot more in the recent 20 or so years,
Okay.
it remains really a mysterious disease where the exact cause is not known. But we now know that in the majority of cases, there is a problem with the way the placenta develops, in that it's not developed well enough to support the growing baby. And that way it becomes stressed and starts producing some yet to be very well defined uh, substances that then go on to cause injury to the mother and causing the widespread complications we see. So, though we don't know the exact cause, we've made advances, but for sure, what we know is that for the cure to happen, we need to deliver the mother, because that way then we deliver the placenta, which we think is the major culprit. So we have to deliver, the ultimate cure is delivery, but we are still trying to understand, but we know that the placenta really is the culprit in that it produces some factors or substances which go on to damage the mother's different organs, causing the symptoms as we know them: high blood pressure, the kidney failure, the liver failure, the convulsions. And so that is it for now, but I just want to say that as we make advances, especially as technology improves, we are trying to also see what we can do about some of those suspected substances that cause injury, because we are trying to use them to improve how we diagnose the disease, how we treat, and how we predict which woman is likely to get the disease, so that we are able to tailor make care for them and improve their outcomes.
And Annette, you just made mention to technology, and your research focus, and together with your research group, has been looking at how you can utilize AI for data collection. And I wonder if you want to speak a little bit about that and how you're making this possible, especially in an area where there's a lot of underinvestment when it comes to women's health, and the area of focus that you're looking at in terms of maternal, newborn, and child health.
Yes, so thank you, Juliet, for the work I'm doing as a Callistus Juma Fellow. In addition to what I've been doing with my group for the last 15 or so years, we are also trying to utilize artificial intelligence to try and improve the analysis and developing of models that can predict which woman is likely to get preeclampsia, stillbirth, fetal growth restriction, and the other common complications of the disease. So how becomes very important is many people have been trying little bits to try and understand what are these things you can use to be able to predict which woman will get the disease. But some focus on the clinical characteristics, on someone's medical history, or how their previous pregnancies have been. Others try to use what we call biomarkers, which are produced by the placenta, and many other things. And then also some have tried to look at the social demographic characteristics of these women and come up with a lot of risk profiles for which women are likely to get preeclampsia. But at the end of the day, these have not been very good at predicting. And why? It's because our women come as a package. They come from with their social demographics. They come with their clinical characteristics. They come with those biological characteristics, which could be genetic, which could be the biomarkers of interest. So what AI is helping us to is to bring all these together and be able to develop what we would think are very strong and robust models that could be very accurate in first of all diagnosing the disease, but also predicting who is likely to get. And moreover, this is even very important because we are doing it in a population at very much at risk, which is in sub-Saharan Africa. So we are getting those things which are really context specific and incorporating them in this model, and then be able to generate as much data as we can, because artificial intelligence usually requires a lot of data, a lot of context to be considered, so that it works really effectively for that population for which one wants to apply it. So that's additional work we are doing. And though we are still collecting the data, we are in early days of trying to analyze so that we can now start validating within the same context. And it's really looking promising because we shall get models which really work for the African woman who is very much likely to get the disease, but also to get the very severe forms that usually lead to her death, or if she survives, she has a lot of disability, or if she survives herself with minimal disability, she could end up with no babies, which in the end makes it like a very lost cause. I mean, one gets pregnant with all these risks and then goes home with no baby to account that or that for. So that is the exciting part of the Callistus Juma Fellowship, that we are trying to use AI to understand fully all the contextual factors that could lead to women developing these pregnancy complications.
And I mean, Annette, it makes sense why you would be doing this study. First of all, on the continent, you've mentioned the population that you're doing the research on, especially given, for African women who are most at risk of preeclampsia. It's a very or grossly understudied area. That's one. And then two, the risk of perinatal death is 8 times higher in sub-Saharan Africa than in high-income countries. And then the third one being that, the amount of investments, you've mentioned the Callisis Juma, where I think you are fortunate enough to receive funding. It's a very underinvested area. I mean, one of the questions I also wanted to ask you is I want to link this now to from your research and clinical practice, what are some recurring trends or patterns you've seen in maternal health across communities? Anything that has surprised or concerned you in addition, just as you've been carrying out the research, are there any surprises that have popped up that you were not anticipating?
Yes, in my research work and working with the community and teams and working in sub-Saharan Africa, uh, there are many things which continue to surprise me every day. One of them is we thought we've made a lot of awareness about preeclampsia, for example, and reached everywhere to try and make people know what the disease is and how they need to to make contact with the hospitals as soon as they know they are pregnant, so that we are able to, if it comes, to diagnose it early, so that will improve their outcomes. But many times, when we go out and try to talk, it's as if we are opening
Research-wise.
some new area we are discovering a new cohort for just for avoiding the bad word. We are discovering niches where there is totally no knowledge, and sometimes this has nothing to do with women's education status. Some of these are people who are highly educated, and which is another surprise. And what even surprises, some of these have had
Yeah.
babies 3, 4 times, 5, but they've never heard about preeclampsia. So I'm like, oh my God, people can be lucky because they go through all this and they're like, you mean this disease is new or it's been around all these years and I just missed it? So there are many people who have experienced pregnancy, but they remain very unaware of preeclampsia as a major complication. So that surprises me, but also makes me know that we need to find different ways of reaching the last woman, the last person who makes decisions for this woman. So going outside our comfort zones of always talking to the same people. And by the way, this month of May is World Preeclampsia Month, and I mean coming month, and then 22nd is the World Preeclampsia Day. So we're already planning how to do the things we don't usually do to make sure we create awareness in the places where we have not reached before. So awareness remains really surprisingly low, even where we would expect it to be high, especially the educated. The other thing that continues to surprise me is how little investment in women's health uh, is and continues to be. Everybody, when you tell them about women's health, their complications, they look very concerned and willing to do something about it. But when one goes to look at the different funding mechanisms, and this is both on the continent and globally, you find that really less than 1% funding goes into women's health. And to me, I feel it's a natural place to start. Fund women's health, make women survive, their babies survive, and have a very good population of people who can do many other things. But it's not very obvious. So funding being low continues to be a surprise. The other thing that continues to surprise me about women's health is how, again, women themselves uh, don't think there's a problem with the way things are going sometimes for women's health. And why I'm saying so is this funding,
Yeah.
when we try to advocate, the biggest voices are not necessarily women's voices. I think sometimes that is a bit of a frustration. I wish we could have women's voices louder alongside the men who are also trying to make this noise so that we improve this health.
Such as?
And some of these things, there are a lot of low hanging fruit. I mean, taking children to girls to school. Of course, these days we're also trying to make sure we don't leave the boys out. But taking children to school, already you put them on a trajectory of good maternal health, because they will delay having early sex, they will delay having unwanted pregnancies. Even when they want them, they will be have planned for it. So a lot of things really that require advocates, which we would think would be the expected advocates, but they are not. And maybe lastly, one of the things I could talk about, which has surprised me in women's health, is the fact that though we keep talking about uh, how there's a lot of women's emancipation, there are many women in high places who have not really yet been empowered to demand for better services as for women's health. And this goes against the other ones I was talking about of advocating for the others. But they themselves are not beneficiaries. We've had, for example, lost some high profile politicians, women who are really elite by all standards. But then you get to the bottom of it is that decisions for their care were being made by someone really much less informed. So again, meaning that they still, our women are still not really well empowered to demand for what is rightfully theirs when it comes to women's health services. So many things surprising me, but I think also there have been good surprises.
No, and this is this I love the way you've transitioned us from a key issue that affects mothers at pregnancy and how it affects us as women overall, and then also the contribution or the necessity to advocate and create visibility around those issues, not only through champions who are male champions, but also women champions who can voice out some of these issues. In fact, I was going to ask you if there were any lessons from your own pregnancy that informed your research. And sometimes you find yourself recalling, your experience as a mother and how then you work in your research group, and maybe a short answer on that one.
Actually, I've sometimes intentionally don't talk about my experience as a mother because I don't want it to appear like necessarily that is what inspires me, but it is really much part of this inspiration.
Yeah.
I'm a mother myself. I've had three children. I always say I've seen it all types of deliveries, the cesarean, the normal birth. But I've actually also been a survivor of preeclampsia in my early days, and that was at a very young, when I just become an obstetrician. Uh, I suffered the same, but good enough. I live to see my preterm baby. She's still alive and doing well. But at the back of my mind, I always felt, yeah, that this is the one which really uh, can kill anybody. It doesn't matter status, and can debilitate anybody, have killed anybody's children. So it inspired me a lot to venture into the field. And unfortunately, I've told this story before that during the course of my PhD, as I did this research, I lost one of my friends, colleagues of the same, and we worked in the same hospital. So it is something which can affect anybody. So you can't sit back and relax. So it was very much because of my experience and of those close to me that added to this inspiration to make life better for other women.
No, and it's through our lived experiences that sometimes we get inspired to take action. I'm a mother myself, so I can relate to. I've never suffered a preeclampsia, but I know what it means to get not a preterm child, but have a child who goes through, for example, NICU. So I can relate to this as well. I think it's our experiences that actually form us and make us take charge. Annette, very quickly, preeclampsia, when you look at the different age brackets, maybe younger mothers, the teenagers or mid adults in the 20s, in the 30s, do you tend to see that there's an impact at on the different age sets, or is it just consistent?
Preeclampsia has many risk factors, but there are those which are consistent. And one of them is the
Yeah.
extremes of maternal age. The ones who are below 18 and the ones above 40 years. So we are actually beginning to see that a lot of the maternal deaths from preeclampsia, the driver is the young mothers, teenage mothers. So you can imagine how much uh, life is at a very young age is lost because of this disease. So yes, teenagers are at risk, and actually part of the messaging now is for us to see how we reach them and alert them, first of all, how to prevent these pregnancies, but also when they, by some bad luck or somehow get pregnant, they should know that they're at risk.
Yeah.
And also because the disease is common among first-time mothers, so it's a bit of a double tragedy when it comes to young mothers.
And at what point in the trimesters does it tend to happen a lot? Is it first, second, third? I can't remember if there's a fourth.
Well, it happens in the second trimester towards the third, which is about 5 months. And well, what we see actually is that it's almost half half. Some women really get it towards term when they're almost due to have the baby, and others get it very early. Now, the problem is usually those who get it very early, about 5 months, because usually what that means, we shall deliver them and then they will not have the baby survive, and which usually drives them to immediately get another baby and then they get it again. Because also one of the other major risk factors for preeclampsia is those women who have had it before. They are 4+ times likely to get it again. So once they lose the baby, they get pregnant and then get it again. So also risking their lives more and more. But we know that a woman who is after getting a child, she can be ready to take any risk on her life. So there's more reason why we are doing the work we're doing to try and find ways of supporting women, whether they've had preeclampsia before, so that they're able to survive and survive with the baby.
We're coming to the end of the podcast, unfortunately. You are conducting this amazing study on the continent. Imagine yourself 3 years from now. And what does success look like? You know, you've done a study, you've come out with amazing data, you have all the tools to be able to roll out. What does success look like?
But to me, success will be when some of my findings, especially the biomarkers, those biological uh, parameters we can use to see which women are likely to get preeclampsia, when they have been translated into clinical use, and we have incorporated them in guidelines, because already we are seeing a lot of promise, and they are being used with to improve with the certainty with which we know which woman will get preeclampsia or which woman has preeclampsia when we are diagnosing. Because currently those are major challenges: prediction of who is likely to get, or being sure that what we are diagnosing is preeclampsia, especially where laboratory tests, the current one we are doing, are not easy to do, they are not affordable. So to me, if we start seeing the early translation into practice, I would be happy that success has come, and then move on to do more in other areas.
No, I mean, we look forward to hearing from Uganda that Professor Annettee Nakimuli has discovered the key test or the reason why preeclampsia happens in African women, subsequently helping the diagnosis of this condition and also possibly even informing treatment options. I know that could be a long way to go, but it's always a start. One of the things that we also love to ask on this podcast, beyond your area of work, you know, we don't live in a vacuum, is beyond your work as an OBGYN, what are the things, when you look out into the world, what are the things that fascinate and scare you at the same time? Or even as just you, the Ugandan African woman, yes.
The things that excite me, I'll start with those. First of all, I'm so excited by how the mobile phone has revolutionized the way things are done in Africa. It makes us reach where we wouldn't reach in terms of many services, not just healthcare, but financial. I mean, through the mobile money, but also the fact that a phone call can come from a very rural place when a woman has a challenge and then she can be advised, or a healthcare worker who is not in a place where there are many people to support them to give adequate care can easily make a phone call and that saves a life. To me, the mobile phone has been really a big part of what has excited me. And I feel we need to harness it more to see how we improve access to care, especially in those very underserved areas. The other thing which excites me, but also is something that worries me, is the use of social media. Now, social media has it is it has its good and bad side. I'm sure everybody appreciates that. The good side of it is the fact that access to information is a lot of access. People can do find out a lot of things, and a lot of things is passed on at a rapid rate. Now, the downside to it is that sometimes that information may not be credible. It can mislead some women or some people to think it's accurate, but also alongside it comes a lot of misinformation. And that sometimes requires a lot of time to undo, especially when it has had far reaching effects. For example, in the maternal health world, we are drumming up a lot of support to immunize pregnant women, to improve their babies, to prevent the babies from getting infections. Like tetanus has been here for a long time, but the others on the radar. But it's very easy for someone to spoil all that in a go and state how the intentions of those vaccines is to finish off the African race. But it's not easy to undo that. So social media is a friend and foe at the same time, but it's something we have to live with it. Now, the other thing that really is exciting me is the use of artificial intelligence in the field of medicine, but everywhere. I mean, I am, besides my work as a gynecologist, I am a teacher. I teach doctors, I teach future specialists. But I can assure you, we are having the difficult discussion of how do we harness, instead of running away from artificial intelligence, not only as a tool that will aid us into caring for our mothers, but also in trying to train our future generation of doctors, how to examine them. And there are things which will take us ages to do, a whole year. You're trying to set up questions, but AI, responsible use, can do it in just one day. So that is exciting. And I know there is a worry that maybe AI has come to take our jobs. But as people say, those who fear AI will perish. It's just us trying to see how do we harness it responsibly and be able to serve humanity better. So those are exciting moments in my lifetime, and I'm sure things will be different 10 years from now because of AI.
I could not have put it any better myself, Prof Nakimuli. And with that, you are pushing boundaries for women's health, not only on the continent, but globally. Your lived experience, capacity building, and leadership efforts are what is required to make women's health a priority, and not just in Uganda, across the world as well. We thank you for your efforts, and we are wishing you every bit of success. And with that, that's a wrap on this episode of Connecting the Dots podcast. Remember, every idea starts with a dot. It's what you do with it that changes the game. So stay curious, stay bold, and keep asking why. Thank you.